Hi there. Now, being able to synthesise and summarise is important. We don't always need to explain every single detail about a text. Instead, it might be helpful to look at key points and to draw out the main ideas. Now, this is an important skill for life, not just for GCSE English Language. So, without further ado, let's get started. When you summarise, you're not just copying out a text, you're looking for the key ideas, the points that the reader may really need to know. And to synthesise takes things a little bit further. This is where you look for the salient points, the main points, perhaps focusing on two texts alongside each other. Let's have a think about how you might summarise and synthesise. It's a good idea to understand the text well, thinking about why they've been written, who they're aimed at, the audience, what their key messages are. Knowing such information will help you to summarise more effectively. If you're asked to synthesise two texts, you will need to draw out key ideas, such as similarities or differences between both, often on a particular theme you're given. Try to make sure that your response is balanced between both will be helpful, so you don't write more about one than the other. Identifying key words is a useful way of summarising, and there'll be more on this later on. But let's have a quick look now at how we could do this. So at number 1 Church Row lived Bob. He was 35 and worked as a local vet. When Bob married Sally, they both said it was the happiest day of their lives. But when they got Hamish, their overexcited and overlarge puppy, their lives changed forever. Next door at number 2 Church Row lived Maureen and Helen, elderly sisters who had never married. They had 2 cats, Molly and Hilda, who rarely left their favourite spot by the open fire. So, thinking about a question, how would you summarise the differences between the lives of the people in this extract? Have a think about that. And let's move on to think more about how this works in practice. So summarising is a valuable skill for life. You might be sat in a meeting and need to make notes on key points that are made, or perhaps you are revising for a subject and want to summarise the main ideas of a topic. You might be asked to summarise your reasons behind a project idea too, so thinking about how you summarise will be really useful. First off, let's have a look at a text. It is about ways of making online teaching and learning more effective. Make the classes shorter. Instead of taking longer sessions, it's advisable to keep them short and crisp. This ensures that the students are listening to the whole session since it matches their attention span. Based on the topic chosen by the teachers, they should design the class in such a way that all the key points are discussed in a compact manner. Keeping them short will make the learning process easier and students will be able to understand and remember the content better. Progress check-ins. Conducting tests and making sure they show the progress of the students is really important. Make sure that learning is effective and students are able to grasp whatever they are being taught. Conducting tests and grading them keeps up the competitive spirit in students. They work harder to score better, and the same grades can be shared with the parents to make them aware of the situation. Okay, so now you've read and listened to this extract, how would you summarise it? Well, I would suggest looking at the key points that are mentioned. A task such as summarise the key points of the text might look like this. The most effective learning takes place in short sessions alongside regular testing to keep students focused. Now here I've taken the main ideas of the text and summarised these. There are lots of other details which would be useful but not necessary for a summary. Now remember, I talked about synthesis earlier on. If you are asked to synthesise, you may well need to look at 2 texts and comment on the main points. So here are 2 extracts. One, imagine it was written in the 1800s, and the other, modern and contemporary. Text 1. The presence of chimney stacks in London's East End is sufficient evidence proving why and how the streets have suffered, how the buildings have blackened, and how the hacking coughs of the workhouse boys can be heard throughout the hours of the night. The air is thick with black, and the dark alleys running in between houses is no different. And text 2. The congestion charge has done its job, so why are the streets of London choked beyond recognition? Why are black cabs bumper to bumper alongside trucks, 4x4s and flashy soft tops? When this city has one of the best public transport systems in the world? Well, who knows? But even though I'd rather walk and stretch my legs, this won't do my poor lungs any good at all. Okay, so here are two texts about a quite similar theme, but with different focuses. A task requiring synthesising might be something like this. What similar points do both texts have in terms of their perspective on pollution in London? Have you had a bit of a think about the question? It's a good idea to write a few points down, and in a moment I will give you an idea about how to approach the task. So here goes. Text 1's focus is primarily on how severe the impact of pollution is on the City of London. The writer uses the adjective black and the verb hacking to illustrate the impact that pollution has on the streets and the city's residents. Text 2 is quite similar, particularly towards the end when it describes the writer's poor lungs. Now, there are different ways of weighing up key points between different texts. One way of practicing this skill is by looking at visual images, and here are two on the screen that you can look at. So let's finish up by thinking about these two images. If I asked you to summarise the differences between them, you might write about how one is set on a country road, whilst the other shows a complicated motorway setup. In one picture, it has snowed, whilst in the other, it looks dry and unaffected by the weather. The first picture includes a person, the other just shows vehicles. One picture shows a lot of the sky, whereas the other is an aerial view of the roads. So you get the general idea, hopefully. It's often easier to practice this task with visual stimuli like this. So here's your challenge to finish off the session. Summarise in no more than 25 words what you have learnt today. Tough, huh? It's quite hard to have a limited amount of words to write, but it's a very good skill to practice regardless.